Hi everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle, where sadly we're going to be talking about a Sunderland defeat. Sunderland beaten 1-0 at the Stadium of Light by Swansea City after Ben Cabango's second half goal. As ever, I'll give you some of my thoughts on the game the next day, my reflections on it, and then I'll get into your questions and comments. We might be a little bit shorter this week because most of the questions and comments, I think we're all asking the same questions. So we're really going to be talking about how worried should we be about Sunderland's performance level 4 games out from the playoffs. And also, what should Le Bris do with the team now after a fairly underwhelming display on home turf? So just in terms of the game itself and my thoughts on it, really disappointed with Sunderland's performance, even though I think you have to accept that because of where we are in the season, this slightly, Le Bris calls it weird situation where Sunderland have known for quite some time how their season's going to end. I think a little bit of a dip is understandable. However, I think there is a bit of an alarming pattern that's grown really, whereas I think since the international break in the Coventry game, I think you have to give, and we have done so certainly after the West Brom game, some credit to the players for their mindset, their defensive endeavour. I think the spirit and the togetherness that's been on show has been really good. But the attacking play has really not got going, and I think yesterday was a continuation of that, where the only real save that I can remember Lawrence Figueroa making in the Swansea goal was that Tommy Watson effort where he tried to sweep it past him. Not a bad connection actually to find the far corner, and the Swansea goalkeeper made a good save. Even that really came from a little bit of a defensive error. I think Josh Key will feel he should have cleared his lines. So certainly someone not really creating that many chances, not really opening the opposition up. I have to say that I have a lot of respect for the way that Swansea approached the game, certainly in the first half an hour. We've talked about a lot this season about how a lot of teams, because of the pace of Sunderland's front line, because of the creativity of their midfielders and their wingers, come here and slow the game down from minute one, put 10 players behind the ball, try and frustrate, try and quieten the crowd. To begin with, Swansea went the other way. They were quite direct in their possession, obviously very different to the kind of Swansea way that we've become accustomed to over the years. But Alan Sheehan, the interim boss, clearly put his own stamp on the side. And while they were direct in possession and they didn't really take any risks in build-up, I did think that they were really, really brave in their pressing game. You know, they risked being cut open by Sunderland in order to try and nick the ball and create chances. And yeah, I think you have to say in the first 20, 25 minutes, Sunderland weren't really up to that challenge, and Swansea could and should have taken the lead. Lewis O'Brien, who, to be fair, a really established championship player, caused Sunderland a lot of problems, and obviously if his finishing had been better, Sunderland would have fallen behind. Sunderland clearly got back into the game, I thought, and were okay for the second half of the first half, if that makes sense. Some good things in their game, a lot more control, conceded a lot less chances, but without ever opening Swansea up. Obviously, the goal is a soft and it's a cheap one. I think at that point of the game, to be fair, that while I've praised Swansea certainly for the first half an hour, by that point in the game, by half-time, just after half-time, they had stopped creating any chances. Frustrating for Sunderland to give a soft free kick away. Obviously, some debate over whether it was a free kick. Maybe Sunderland were a little bit unlucky, but certainly a cheap one to give away. And then to concede from a set piece was a real blow. And then obviously what that does is we then saw Swansea, understandably, because they have a lead to protect and because of their position in the table, we then saw them kind of move into a very different phase of the game where they did do all that stuff, slow the game down, take time out wherever they could, but I thought they defended their box really, really well. And actually, the concerning thing from a Sunderland point of view is by the end of the game, again, they hadn't really carved out a lot of chances. Now, Sunderland did get a lot better after the substitutions in terms of, I thought the urgency and the tempo was an awful lot better. I think we all know that Sunderland are a different team with Enzo Lefebvre at the moment, the way that he can come deep to get the ball and start moves and quicken things up, the way he can just make things happen around the opposition box. He is a little bit of a game changer. I guess the question is, should we be a little bit concerned that at the moment it feels like we're quite reliant on him for inspiration when he's on the pitch? I thought Mayenda had an impact again. I think he's just a player who makes things happen. A little bit unlucky, maybe the one or two of his little runs, one of his two little sort of jinks in the box didn't come to a shot where he had a clear shot on goal. And I actually thought, although he made some mistakes in terms of, I know we'll talk about the pass that he put out of play, he gave a couple of cheap free kicks away, which were really frustrating. I do think Samed brought some intensity and some energy when he came on the pitch. I was pleased with that. I thought he looked a lot sharper than he did in his previous appearances. I thought he got about the pitch much better than he has previously done. There were times where his touch was a little bit heavy and you could see that he's still finding from rhythm, but I'm interested to see how he goes over the Easter weekend, because I did actually think he brought a little bit of tempo. So I suppose you could take some reassurance from the fact that Sunderland did improve towards the end of the game when maybe the starting 11 was a little bit more familiar. But overall, yeah, definitely an underwhelming display. It was interesting talking to Le Bris after the game, really, because it was the first time where he's kind of said, you know what, it's not so much about the result at the moment, it's about getting this squad ready for the playoffs. It's the first time he's kind of openly sort of really talked about that and saying, look, we are disappointed with the performance, we want to improve, But the main thing is getting the squad kind of fresh. And I think from his perspective, he looks at that and says another half an hour for Lefebvre, getting Samed back on the pitch, and managing Leo Yelder's minutes, giving Job a rest again. I think he feels that in the long run, there's going to be a lot of positives that we look back from this period that maybe we can't see now. The balances should be concerned about, kind of, as we said, maybe a bit of momentum being lost in the interim. I think it's a really tricky question. Le Bris is always at pains to say that we're in this strange period at the moment because we've deserved it, because we've played so well over the season. We've accrued so many points that teams around us haven't been able to do. And I think that's absolutely fair, and we've got to keep that in perspective when we chat about Sunderland's form. But we also are desperate to see Sunderland perform in this playoff campaign, and that's why we're all a little bit concerned with the performances, and I think that's fair enough. So let's get into your questions and comments. A lot of you asking around this same topic, so I'll just put the questions in together and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it at a bit of length. So Chantel says, I think just meandering through the remaining games and the belief we can bring players back in and be right at it for the playoff games is a dangerous game in itself. Michael says, playing this right, I think, so far, and giving players rest and allowing others to ease back into it. But how far do we take it? Easter fixtures rotating the squad and then back at it after the Blackburn game. Colin says, it's all about peaking at the right time now. Rest and Job felt sensible, but time will tell. What's the strategy through the playoffs? It's a fine balance of recuperation, confidence, match fitness, and team harmony. And then a couple of you on our instant reaction video on YouTube asking much the same thing. At what point do we start playing our best team? Is it best to get the best team out now to start building some momentum? I think this is a big debate for Le Bris. My personal feeling is that I'm totally in line with Michael in terms of, I think these Easter fixtures, because it's sort of 2 games and 4 games, and because you've got players who are still feeling their way back from injury, I expect, and I don't really have a problem with Le Bris taking a similar approach in terms of rotating. In my personal opinion, I would love to see Daniel get a rest in at least one of those games. I think his form has understandably dipped because of the workload that he's had. I don't think his last few performances have been at his best level. And so he's a player who I would like to see get a rest because I think he potentially needs one. I think hopefully Job coming back in over the Easter weekend and Salis being back allows Le Bris to do that. I don't want to see Enzo Lefebvre risked because in terms of like 290 minutes in 4 days, I think that's way too big a risk to take at this stage of the season. So I'm comfortable maybe you could get half an hour in one game and start and get an hour in another. I think that would be a really sensible approach. So I do think that while I've raised some concerns with the performance level and definitely the attacking play, I don't have an issue with what Le Bris is doing. I think it is the right thing. For me, you've got 2 games there at the end of the season, Oxford away, QPR away. There's a week in between the fixtures, a chance for players to train well, to get some rest and recovery as well. I think those 2 games, you would like, I think, to see pretty much the team that you're going to play in the playoffs, because I think that then gives you an opportunity to sort of reset, to get that familiarity back, hopefully build a bit of confidence. So I think the last couple of games of the season, I really want to see something just going at it, 100%, strongest team that you can possibly name. If you want to rotate from the bench, then that's fair. But I think the next couple of games, I do think realistically we are going to see more rotation. Maybe that'll lead to some more disjointed performances, but I do think that's the right approach. I think there's too many players at the moment that you can't afford to take too many risks with. So hopefully that answers that a little bit. Like, I do agree that in terms of you need to build some momentum, and I think you don't want too much disruption to the team at the back end of the season. But I do think the Easter weekend, we need to be fairly pragmatic in terms of, I think there are players who need a rest, and I think we have got to keep being cautious with Lefebvre. It's frustrating as it could be because we're all desperate to see him on the pitch for 90 minutes wherever possible, and rightly so because he's so good. But we don't want to see Sunderland taking too many risks. So we've got a question here as well from Ian, who says, feels like we are too lax and our attacking play is becoming a major concern. Lack of speed and ideas, and looks lazy at times. Missing Job a lot in my opinion, and Lefebvre and Meander are the only threats at the moment. How big a concern do you think it is, and how does Le Bris view it, and how do you think it can be fixed? So thanks Ian, great question. I think the attacking play is something that we're all talking about at the moment. Just have a sip of my coffee and then we'll get into it. I think as I mentioned at the start, it's a big concern for me. We did have a good chat with Le Bris about this after the game. And he sort of said he was a little bit concerned, and that he kind of identified that he does think that Sunderland's build-up play isn't right for whatever reason at the moment. So in terms of the playing out from the back, beating the opposition press, getting yourself into a position where the likes of Riggs, Robert, Watson can break, he obviously feels that isn't quite right. So that's a big, I think, a point on the training ground for him moving forward, something that needs correcting. The other point he made was that he has disrupted the attacking patterns on the pitch because of the rotation. So the point you made yesterday was Trey Hume moving over to the left back. That obviously disrupts the triangle on the right-hand side. Chris Rigg played as the left-sided 8 yesterday rather than the right-sided 8, which he usually plays. So he was moved away from Roberts, and obviously Hume, Roberts and Rigg have that little pattern going. Joe obviously has played a lot with whoever the left winger is in the team, whether that's Watson, Mundle or even Lefay, really. So I think he feels that when he puts his more normal, inverted commas, team out in terms of, probably certainly Hume and Roberts down the right-hand side, probably Rigg when Joe comes back in on the left-hand side to link up with whoever's playing there. I think his feeling is that you'll see things click a little bit more and there'll be a bit more familiarity and a bit more fluency. I can totally understand that, but I think it's definitely a concern that Sunderland have gone quite a few games without creating that many chances. And I do think that, it's the thing with the striker is obviously it is a concern that he still hasn't scored in 9 games. And personally, I think that he looked a little bit frustrated yesterday and not at his most threatening. Now, Le Bris actually completely disagreed with that after the game. He said that actually he felt that there was a lot of Wilson's game that he really liked, the attempts to run in behind. He felt he was doing a lot of the right things. It just didn't come off for him yesterday, which I thought was an interesting view. He really did back him. And he made very clear that, with strikers, he feels that it can just be one little thing that can change things around and get back on the goal trail. So I think he's probably a little bit less concerned than a lot of us are about Issador's form. I think Meander is making a real run for that striker spot in the playoffs. But Le Bris kind of hinting afterwards that he likes Meander's versatility and that I think kind of hinting that he'll stick with Issador. So let's see if Issador can get a goal over the Easter weekend. Hopefully that can just click things back into gear. So I agree with you, Ian. I don't think the attacking play is where it needs to be, but hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight as to why Le Bris thinks that is and why he thinks it'll be easily fixed. How reassured you are by that, I don't know. It's definitely something that Sunderland need to improve at the moment. And as you say, I think we do feel a little bit dependent on Lefay at the moment to make some magic happen, and that's not where you want to be. But let's hope that as a few more familiar faces come back into the side, that things will improve. I guess time will tell. So Ian says, also, Tommy Watson, in my opinion, he's been poor in both the Norwich and Swansea games. Think his head is already gone, isn't fully committing when he's playing in half-heartedness. Just question his mentality since the Brighton transfer. What do you think, Phil? Maybe time for Meander on the left wing until the playoffs. Well, listen, the first thing to say is you've got to be very, very careful because with Jayden Danns not playing this season, you can't play Meander and Issador 90 minutes every single game from here to the playoffs because you're then taking a huge risk. If either of those strikers gets an injury that risks their playoff campaign, then Sunderland are not just losing a striker, but they're losing whoever plays their best substitute, their best impact substitute. So Meander in particular, we've got to be so careful with. He cannot play 90 minutes, whether it's on the left wing or up front, every game until the end of the season. It's far too big a risk, certainly over the Easter weekend where there's 2 games in 4 days. So I said it before, Sunderland have to use Watson. In my opinion, there's absolutely no 2 ways about that because of where the squad's at. Now, I disagree personally, Ian, with the suggestion that his head's not really been in it in the last couple of games. I just think it's a reality of how long he's been out. Don't forget how little senior football Tommy Watson has played. And don't forget that when he first came into the team, when Romain Mundle got injured, he took some time to get to his best level because he's adjusting to the speed, the intensity of the Championship and of senior football generally. He hasn't played a lot of games. The Tommy Watson who was winning some of the matches before he got his injury was not the Tommy Watson who came into the team initially. It took him time to build up to that point. And I think we're just going through that again. I actually thought there was a big improvement in his game yesterday from the Norwich game. I'm not saying that he was like an 8 out of 10 match-winning performance, but I thought he looked more dangerous. I've watched him for a lot of years in the under-21s and coming through into the senior team. He's never been an amazing defensive player. I've got to be completely honest about that. I don't think that, we would never say that Jack Clarke was an amazing defensive player. I don't think that's because he's moving to Brighton. I think that's just because of the style of player he is. I think he will get better with each game. I genuinely do. And I'm not convinced that his head isn't in it. I think everyone can have their own opinions on him leaving Sunderland to go to Brighton, and I totally respect that. But I think he genuinely wants to get Sunderland promoted and leave on a high. And I thought he was a little bit, while not being brilliant yesterday, I thought he was improved. And I think that's just natural rhythm in terms of him coming back from his injury. So hopefully, I guess we'll see in the next couple of games, won't we? If his performances don't improve, then you might view it differently. But I'm hoping that we might start to see him get a little bit better and better as things go on. There was the main kind of questions that people were asking about. Chris said as well, when did we last play really well as a whole team and for more than 45 minutes? It's starting to feel a very, very long time ago. I kind of know what you mean, and definitely Sunderland aren't playing brilliantly at the moment, and it's definitely a worry. I am a little bit concerned in terms of the playoffs in that front. I think thinking off the top of my head, Chris, and maybe you'll all be watching and think of a game that I've missed, but probably the last like really excellent team performance was probably Middlesbrough away, I think, in terms of one of the best performances of the season. There have been some good performances since then in terms of like good team wins. I think the Luton game at home, games like that, where there've been a lot of positives, but for sure, like Sunderland aren't playing as well as they were at times this season at the moment. They definitely aren't. I am a little bit concerned about that, but I do kind of understand why Le Bris is doing what he's doing with the squad. As I say, I think we may have to go through a little bit more pain, if you like, over the Easter weekend. And then hopefully for the last couple of games, when Lefebvre's ready to start games, we might, and Job's back in, and hopefully a couple of other players have had a rest. Hopefully we'll start to see things improve a little bit. So yeah, hopefully that's my honest opinions on a pretty disappointing home performance, and some obvious concerns that I have, but also some reasons why maybe there is a little bit of perspective about it. As ever, can only ever give you my opinions and see whether you agree or disagree with them. Thanks so much for sending your questions in. Thanks so much to everyone who's watched this. I know watching a 15-minute video on a 1-0 defeat at home to Swansea City probably wasn't top of your list for today, but if you have done, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed doing these videos. So thanks for watching. We'll be back after the Bristol City game. Let's manifest. We'll be back with talk about a brilliant, fluid winning performance after Bristol City. See you then next weekend.